special story for you, but before I do that, I have a little smile for you. But it's kind of a serious smile, too. A farmer was in great need of extra hands at haying time and asked the town bum if he could help him out. "What'll you pay me?" "I'll pay you what you're worth." "I won't work for that," he said. Anyway, I thought that was kind of cute. But I'm going to tell you a story about powerless. There's so many people that are having trouble with their electric lights. And I have some little friends that after me month after month about their power bill. And they're going to turn my electricity off. And let me tell you, there's a neighbor just down the hill from us that got a big problem in that area. So this is a story, my tribute to them, my recommendation to them. I've always believed faith was enough until they turned off the electricity, by Rose Bowen. The radio weather forecaster said it was one of the coldest winters in more than 2 decades. Checking out our big outdoor thermometer, I believed him. As if 10 degrees wasn't cold enough, the wind added insult to the injury. Our tin roof made metallic popping sounds with each gust. It was only January, but I dreamed of spring and flowers and sunshine. A knock at the door interrupted my daydream. The kids ran to answer, curious to know who could be out on a day like this. I followed them. "Power company, ma'am," said the man at the door. "I'm here to collect for last month's bill." I swallowed the wave of humiliation that threatened my composure. "We don't have the money yet. My husband hasn't found a new job." The 5 little ones gathered around me by the door made the man sympathetic, but he had to do his job. "Really sorry, ma'am, but I have to cut your power. As soon as you get the bill paid, we'll come right away and get it back on." In seconds, the radio died and the house became silent. I closed the front door and turned to Jerry, my husband, coming through the living room. "What happened?" he asked. "Power company," was all I could squeeze out. The kids began asking questions. "What'll we do now? Is the power really off?" They checked all the appliances and switches to see for themselves. Handing the baby to Jerry, I made my way to the kitchen. I just couldn't believe what was happening. In 13 years of marriage, we'd always been financially comfortable. Our goal had been to move to the country, and live debt-free. Now that's the thing to do. I believe in it. That's what we're doing. As we prayed, offering the Lord all we had, He opened the way for us. We were thrilled at His leading. Our business sold, and so did our home. Step by step, miracles seemed to lead us on. Ultimately, the Lord found us a home on 10 acres in the mountains of southwestern Virginia. It was a dream come true. But no sooner had we moved than financial problems began to develop. Jerry's job didn't provide enough money to meet our needs, and the income we'd counted on from the sale of our business dried up. In an area already economically depressed, it was very difficult for the Sabbath keeper to find work. It seemed that every phone call or piece of mail was a demand for payment from someone. Jerry took odd jobs for extra cash, but it wasn't enough. Having read the story of George Mueller, whose simple trust in God saw his needs supplied in marvelous ways, we had decided to live by faith. We would tell no one but God about our needs. The week before, our checkbook showed just enough money to cover our tithe. It was also enough to pay the electric light bill. Knowing the tithe wasn't ours to use, we turned it in at church. I believed God would provide, maybe miraculously, as He did for Mueller. When the power company sent the late notice, I imagined some ways God might send the money to pay it. I had faith, but now with one flick of the switch, my faith was challenged. I'd like to say that I encouraged my husband and children with words of hope. Although the wood stove warmed the inside of the house, my insides were as cold and bleak as the winter landscape. Then, like a hot spring that melts ice, my anger and frustration bubbled to the surface. I sat on the kitchen floor in front of the wood stove and cried like a baby. Part of me was dying inside, and part of me was screaming like a child with a tantrum. I was angry at the electric company for being so insensitive. I was angry at my husband for not finding a job. Most of all, I was angry with God. He had promised to provide for our needs, and he hadn't kept his promise. We hadn't been wasteful. We'd always lived within our means. We'd even returned tithes to him. Where were the blessings from the windows of heaven? The least he could have done was to keep the power on. We couldn't be much of a witness for him when we couldn't even pay our bills. I went on like this for quite a while. I didn't care if God hit me with a lightning bolt for having those thoughts. By the time I was through, I was exhausted. Then I sensed a voice. Will you trust me in this? I had no answer. Sensing that the storm in the kitchen was over, my husband poked his head at the door. The kids peered around his legs in wide-eyed amazement to see their mother sitting on the floor crying. In a rush, they piled around, hugging me and saying it was going to be okay. My maternal instincts took over, and I reassured them that we'd get through somehow. But I sounded more confident than I felt. Strangely enough, though, as I expressed my feeble confidence, I began to feel better. My practical side snapped into action, figuring out what to do next. Jerry took the older boys to the spring house with buckets for carrying water, while I cleaned out the refrigerator and freezer. He said we were going to be living like the pioneers for a while, and they were delighted with the sense of adventure. Relieved that the worst was apparently over, the younger kids went back to coloring and playing. We set up some shelving on the back porch for our frozen food. At least the Arctic weather was good for something, and put our perishables in big plastic coolers. I cooked dinner on the wood stove, and we feasted like royalty that afternoon. As the sun went down, we lit all the oil lamps and candles we could find. The golden light was actually rather cheerful. We read stories and sang a few songs for family worship. And when it was finally dark, we all went to bed. My spirits were already lighter, but I was still annoyed at God. The next morning we were up with the sun. Not hard when you've gone to bed at 7 o'clock the night before, ready for action. Grabbing a few rolls of quarters, I went into town for batteries and lamp oil. With a radio to listen to, we didn't feel so isolated. Having the wood stove for heat and cooking made the experience bearable. We baked potatoes inside it and rigged an improvised oven on top to bake muffins and toast bread. To my amazement, household chores were done in no time, except for getting water. The spring house was across the street at the bottom of the hill, so hauling water kept us busy. By the third day, the boys thought maybe it wasn't so neat to live like pioneers after all. A few times we heated enough water for a bath in the tub, but we learned why the pioneers probably didn't bathe more than once a week. Same with doing laundry. After washing clothes by hand in the bathtub, I used the laundromat for my big loads. By the second week, we were actually enjoying life without electricity, if only we had a hand pump for water. It was during the second week that I once again heard the voice. It said, "I promise to provide all your needs. Do you have all you need?" To my surprise, I had to say, yes. Yes. We had food, clothing, shelter, good health, each other. Electricity wasn't really a need after all. My anger and lack of faith were so embarrassing now. Trusting God was the reason we moved to this here in the first place. This was part of our great adventure. We lived without electricity for a little more than 3 weeks. It would have been longer if not for a church member who stopped by one evening to find us reading by oil lamps. When he figured out that we had no electricity, he called the pastor, who sent some wheels in motion to get the power back on. But when the electricity came on, we couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. We had learned so much about the things we didn't need, lessons that would not have been learned any other way. The Lord had stretched us and shown us an even simpler life than we'd lived before. Being powerless had cut us loose from some of the things that kept us too busy to spend time with Him and His Word. No electricity made it easier to read, sing, and spend time with each other. What a precious lesson. Being powerless turned out to be a powerful experience. Rose Brown is a wife, mother, homemaker, and freelance writer who lives in Floyd, Virginia. She's written other articles too. God bless you. Oh, I have one more little thing here. I'd rather, and my husband's given me the eye, I'd rather serve my God and live on a bowl of soup a day than reign as king upon the throne and not know how to pray. I'd rather live in poverty and Christ, my Savior, love than be a multi-millionaire and have no home above. I'd rather in an almshouse stay or in a cellar cold and know that I a sheep redeemed am in the shepherd's fold than be the proudest plutocrat that walks this earthly vale and know that heaven will not be mine when earth at last shall fail. I'd rather in a desert dwell and have a home on high than in a jeweled palace live and perish when I die. I'd rather, yes, 1,000 times miss all that earth affords than have while here its richest gift and lose a saint's reward. My soul redeemed by Christ my Lord, serve thou thy master here. What matters it though others have, but all the earth holds dear? And thou these gifts may not possess, thy sins have been forgiven. Thou art the child of God. Thy name has written been in heaven. O soul redeemed by Jesus' blood, to my advice give heed. Seek not the wealth the earth affords. God will supply thy need. And if sore trials, though here endure, while walking in his ways, he'll sanctify them to thy good and turn thy tears to praise. By Neighbor Gortner. That one verse, I'm going to reread that. My soul redeemed by Christ my Lord, serve thou thy master here. What matters it though others have, but all the earth holds dear? And thou these gifts may not possess, thy sins have been forgiven. Thou art the child of God. Thy name has written been in heaven. O soul redeemed, my Jesus' blood, to my advice give heed. Seek not the wealth the earth affords. God will supply thy need. And if sore trials, though here endure, while walking in his ways. He'll sanctify them to thy good and turn thy tears to praise. God bless you.